All right, welcome back. We're talking currencies now on Street Smart. You just saw a chart there of the euro looking at where it is trading intraday. Now, the euro is up versus both the dollar and the yen. In fact, we haven't seen the euro climb this much in about a year. Investors obviously moving back into the currency on news that French and German leaders will be helping recapitalize the banks throughout the region. Well, in September, our next guest actually started to move away from the euro for the first time in years, but now he's moving back in. And joining us is Axel Merk of Merk Investments. As Chief Investment Officer, he oversees more than $700 million in currency-focused assets. Axel, good to see you. Got bearish there on the euro for just a moment, just for the month of September pretty much. Why are you bullish right now?
Sure, it was after a long time. We got bearish on the euro, and now we're back into it. And a couple of things that happened, but relevant to today's news or recent news, is really last week when first Olli Rehn, the EU Commissioner of Monetary Affairs, said banks need to be recapitalized. And then the next day, the lady with the checkbook, Angela Merkel, joined the fray. It is so important to inject the capital into the banks where it can be leveraged, just as the TOP program in the U.S. needed to inject money into the banks rather than buying up in the U.S. the toxic assets or the sovereign bonds in Europe. Because that's where the leverage is. That's where you can regain the confidence. And with Merkel on board, and now over the weekend, of course, Sarkozy, with slight differentiations, joining that call, that is really a positive for the euro. And for the time being, of course, we have a major short squeeze. But if they execute on this, this can take the euro much, much further than it is right now.
Yes, there is a major short squeeze on the euro, and that hasn't changed very much over the last week. And we've been talking today throughout the show to a number of investors as well as analysts who are very pessimistic that things are actually moving quickly in Europe. Many say it's going to take anywhere between 6 months to perhaps 2 years for them to get sorted through some of their issues. But you, Axel, seem to be much more optimistic that the region is working together to get things resolved quickly.
Sure. Well, we were negative on the euro for a bit there because of these tail risks. Overall, we've been positive on the euro for some time. When the euro was running down to 118 last year, we said, let's buy the euro. And the reason was that we argued the issues in the eurozone need to be expressed in the spreads in the bond market, yet the euro can be strong on that. And to the most part, that has happened. And so we don't think this is going to happen quickly either. But it's mostly at the loss of these peripheral countries. The euro as a whole can thrive in that sort of environment precisely because they're more reluctant in spending and printing money. And so this is a process. It's not going to be over anytime soon. But the important thing is that we are setting the signal in the right direction. And it's more than a signal that we're going to work on these banks and take the market objection seriously to say that everything is well. We had that already with the European Banking Authority disclosing all the sovereign debt holdings. The next step was for the market to take those banks seriously and provide, quote-unquote, encouragement for them to recapitalize. And now it's happening, or it's going to happen. And so we're going to have some setbacks, like Slovakia most likely going to vote against that EFSF package. Then they'll scramble to find a workaround. So this is not going to be a smooth ride. But overall, the pressure is going to be on the upside towards the euro in our view.
Axel, how much more of a rally in the euro do you think we could see before year end?
Well, it's very difficult to say. The sentiment was so dramatically negative that alone from the short squeeze alone, we could see substantial further upside. But then beyond that, it really depends on how people execute. I can see scenarios where we go to 145, but I can also see scenarios where we'll right back off if indeed the bickering is going to escalate. Remember, the policymakers will act when the pressure from the bond market is there. As soon as that pressure abates, the policymakers lose interest again. So we need to have that sort of crisis attitude for policies to be pushed through. So if things get too smooth, we're going to lose momentum, and that's also going to be a negative for the euro. So it has to be this very tense environment. As long as we can keep up the tension, in our view, the euro on a volatile ride can continue its move upward.
Axel, events in Europe have really been an overhang on emerging markets. We've seen a lot of assets leaving equities there. We've also seen those currencies get hit quite hard so far this year. Over the last few days, though, things seem to be turning around. Are you also bullish on some of the emerging market currencies?
Well, first of all, I don't think the problems we have in the world are all due to Europe. We have plenty of problems in the US, in the UK, in Japan, even in China. Having said that, yes, we are positive on emerging market currencies, not necessarily on the stock markets, but on the currencies. The Chinese renminbi in particular, we are very positive about. But keep in mind, when you buy an emerging market currency, you're embracing the political risk. Many of these currencies are tightly managed, and so you're buying the risk that something has to happen. We believe that domestic inflationary pressures force these policymakers to allow their currencies to appreciate. Very different dynamics from the major currencies. But yes, we are positive on emerging markets to a great extent.
All right, speaking of tightly managed, very quickly, Axel, what do you think will happen with the yuan? It's being taken up by Washington tomorrow, of course, and many lawmakers would like to see the yuan appreciate 20 to 40%.
Well, Chinese policymakers, like any other policymaker in the world, will do what they deem to be in their domestic interest. They're not going to worry about Congress. Now, if Congress does institute protectionist measures, remember, any country that introduces protectionism and has a current account deficit, a trade deficit, really shoots themselves in the foot. The U.S. would be the biggest loser of that. But the politics will run its course in the U.S., and in China, of course, it will run its own course. The Chinese have been embracing reform, but just not at the pace that Congress would like them to.
All right, Axel, appreciate your insight. Thanks so much for joining us here on Street Smart. Good to see you again.